Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Stewart Craker. I am Associate Professor of Early Christian Theology here at Princeton Theological Seminary, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce the speaker tonight, who at this point is well known to you, Professor Willie James Jennings, who is the Andrew W. Mellon Professor of Systematic Theology and Africana Studies at Yale Divinity School. Professor Jennings is a theologian who teaches in the areas of Christian thought, race theory, and decolonial and environmental studies. He is presenting to us this lecture series, the Annie Kinkead Warfield lecture series. Only then will we build, forming a real doctrine of creation, as he's also preparing the work that he will be publishing forthcoming with Yale University Press, Reframing the World, A Christian Doctrine of Creation. He's also the author of The Christian Imagination, Theology, and the Origins of Race, also published by Yale University Press, and the recipient of the 2010 AAR Book of the Year in Constructive Reflective Studies category. It is one of the most important books in theology written in the last 25 years, and a now standard text in colleges, seminaries, and universities. And on a personal note, this is how I have gotten to know Professor Jennings' work until this lecture series is via teaching. I actually began teaching portions of the Christian Imagination to theology students in Geneva, Switzerland, in my first teaching position, so at the very heart of the Reformed Calvinist tradition, and the reformer most prominently associated with a strong doctrine of providence, a doctrine directly entangled with the doctrine of creation and the history of colonialism, and which, as the Christian Imagination brilliantly shows, among other things, played a central role in the colonial redeployment of doctrine in its service. It's a testament to the power of this work that it blew students' minds in that context as both challenging and highly generative. Professor Jennings is also the recipient of the 2015 Grauemeyer Award in Religion for his groundbreaking work on race and Christianity. His commentary on Acts won the Reference Book of the Year award from the Academy of Parish Clergy. He's also the author of After Whiteness, An Education in Belonging, the inaugural book in the theological education between the times, which is also already being very broadly read and taught, and which won the 2020 Book of the Year award from Publishers Weekly and was selected as a finalist for the 2021 AAR Book of the Year award, and in 2023 won the Lilly Fellows Program Book Award. Professor Jennings is also an ordained Baptist minister. So far, we have been following Professor Jennings along the path that he has been taking us through assimilating desire, contemplating connection, overcoming enclosure, and discerning bone and dirt. We are now coming to the fifth lecture, and just as a quick backdrop, in lecture 4, Professor Jennings traced the relationship between bone and dirt, and specifically bone and dirt in counterpoint to the productive logics that may be embedded in vocabularies of soil. Against possessive naturalism that would seek to treat other creatures as objects of sorts to be identified and classified, Professor Jennings has proposed a different way of thinking about relating to creatures through discernment, listening, and conversational attitudes and postures. So tonight, we have the fifth lecture, the penultimate lecture, Embodying Sanctuary. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Jennings.
I want to thank the great doctor for that wonderful introduction. It is a joy to be in your presence. And friends, such joy to be back with you again. Thank you so much. My voice is a little scratchy, not because I have the cold, because I kept talking so much today, which I shouldn't have done, but I'm just enjoying myself being here with you so much. I did have a faculty meeting, so back in my home institutions, which I did by Zoom, so they impinged on my wonderful time here. Shame on them. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to again thank the faculty of Princeton Theological Seminary and your fabulous president for this invitation. It is a high honor and a great joy for me to be here. And I certainly want to acknowledge the presence of one of your wonderful faculty, Dr. Hines, who is here tonight. Just want to acknowledge him. We were together in a Wabash event, and we had such a wonderful time. So to be in his presence, what a joy, what a joy. So friends, this evening, embodying sanctuary. I brought us to a difficult place. It is a place positioned beyond an enclosed world and the ontology and logic of the line. It is a place that releases us from the burdens born of possessive naturalism. It is a place that invites us to live beyond the dismal contemplation of our identities formed by enclosure and separation from land, and toward contemplating connection for the sake of a thriving life together. It is a challenging place. But is this place that I've been describing, is this place nothing more than a dreamscape, a utopia? I think not. It is, in fact, the place beneath our feet. It is, in fact, the creation trying to escape the remade world. We have been rethinking a Christian doctrine of creation from the ground up by suggesting practices that articulate the contours of a renewed doctrine, practices that allow us to slice through the incrustations and fabrications that cover our world with the remade world. This effort, however, requires we face a problem that I have not explicitly named through these lectures, my friends. It is the problem of an enclosed and displaced intellectual life. If, as I have argued in these lectures, we all have been trained to perceive the world through the line of property, prison, border, territory, and the body through a possessive naturalism, my body, then our intellectual life was formed through and inside this pedagogy of alienation. This means that place is fundamentally inconsequential to the character of that intellectual life, its expression and performance. Now, I don't mean place in the sense of being in an institution like Princeton Theological Seminary. I mean place in the full sense of the environment and the built environment, with a depth of sinewed existence with the more than human world. Our intellectual life shows no permeability with our environments and therefore reveals no flow of the living world in it or through it. It shows no wrestling, with the wrestling with our built environments and the ongoing excising of its harmful effects, or even the celebration of its life-giving aspects. Here is the question that I brought to these lectures. What would it look like? What would it look like to articulate an intellectual life that makes present bone and dirt connectivity? Honestly, my friends, I am not sure. But I have, throughout these lectures, turned to poetry to help me answer that question. Why poetry? If you even ask me, why poetry? Why poetry? For two beautiful reasons. First, the poetic breaks open. The poetic breaks open. It breaks open by slowing down our movement in thought, creating cognitive chasms, breaks in the rhythm of discourse to open a deeper listening woven in the thinking. Poetry always lives in the place of its mother, Lecto Divina, and its grandmother, Selah. That is, it lives in the pause. It lives in the pause necessary for weaving, sensing, and thinking. This is contemplation at its best. Secondly, the poetic, I have learned this in recent years, the poetic chases after the landscape. The poetic chases after the landscape, both the body and the land. Poetry always caresses the contours of existence and calls forth the working of the senses, even if only imagined through the mind. So I need poetry. You need poetry to help articulate these practices of a doctrine of creation in order to bring it as close to a showing as one can in a lecture. Could you tell that I watched Michigan leaves blowing across the ground? The red and the orange of the maple tree, the yellow of the birch and the beech and the hickory, the deep purple of the black gum, and the brown of the oaks, all flowing around me, sticking to my clothes, covering the ground. Could you tell that I felt North Carolina heat in July? Its inescapable power flowing through me, forcing my body to match its being. A heat that felt like the Holy Ghost, slaying everything under its reign, causing all to surrender, causing me to release. Could you tell that I sense the water standing in the Long Island Sound in Connecticut, on rocks and rough sand, water that refused the warmth of the sun and yet called me to enter and yield from the need for comfort in order to know its joy and its power to refresh my soul. Could you tell that I stood in those streets between 42nd and 5th in New York City and felt the energy of people and buildings moving while immovable and immovable while moving? And I felt impossibly powerful and overwhelmed at the same time. I could not tell if you could tell, because the place was invisible in me, to me, in that place. What is clear to me is that the practices I am articulating to reframe a Christian doctrine of creation is inside a struggle. It is inside a struggle. The struggle is not to get clear on the nature of our origins. I noted in the last lecture, and I'm saying it again, that we purposely avoided falling into the obsession of origins that mark modern articulations of this doctrine. The doctrine has been marked also by obsessively seeking clarity on the biological status of the creature and the creature's relation to the cosmos. The nature of our origins and the origin of our nature, as we said before, are important matters, but they do not constitute, hear me, they do not constitute the central struggle that this doctrine frames for us, the central struggle that the life of the triune God draws us into. What if we understand that struggle to be the struggle to discern the contours of our existence as sanctuary? We are to be sanctuary. Allow me to share a poem with you by Ada Limon, Limon, from her beautiful collection, The Hurting Kind, entitled Sanctuary. I will read it slow because you must hear every line tonight. Everything depends on hearing every line tonight. Suppose it's easy to slip into another's green skin. Bury yourself in leaves and wait for a breaking open, a breaking out. I have before been tricked into believing I could be both an I and the world. The great I of the world is both gaze and gloss, to be swallowed by being seen. A dream, to be made whole by being not a witness, but witnessed. To be made whole by being witnessed. Limon's poem places the self, let's call it that, in a new possibility of life by being buried, swallowed, through entering the green skin of leaves, and to remain there until there is a breaking open, a breaking out. She calls this a dream. I want to align this dream with the work of discernment that we noted in the last lecture. Discernment as the constituting practice. Discernment as the constituting practice of knowing ourselves through place. And press into this question: what does it mean to become sanctuary? In this lecture, I want us to sit with sanctuary as a holy calling for the human creature, a calling that was and is intended to reveal to us our existence as imago Dei, the image of God, or more precisely, to give us a glimpse, just a glimpse of the imago Dei. Yet in our time, that calling goes unanswered. And therefore, what it means to be imago Dei remains at a level of theological abstraction in the way most Christians understand and articulate that meaning for life in place. Sanctuary, sanctuary. The word immediately calls up the idea of a place of safety or a place of escape where one is kept whole and alive from all that which would destroy or steal your life. We know that in our moment, the very idea of sanctuary is being criminalized, which highlights one powerful aspect of a sanctuary. Sanctuary spatializes and intensifies resistance. Students, write that down. Sanctuary spatializes and intensifies resistance. Here is sanctuary. It is a place that can challenge, if but for a moment, the prevailing social order. It can suspend the normal rules of governmental power. It can hold at bay those outside from capturing those inside. Yet a sanctuary can also be a place that holds at bay important and necessary change, like the anti-apartheid movements in formerly apartheid South Africa, or currently in Palestine, in Israel. Sanctuary in this regard can be a temple of segregation, and those within it are turned into its high priests. So sanctuary, as we know it, shows all the possibilities and problems of resistance. Why? Because it sits inside the line. It sits inside the line and is therefore subject to its logics. Sanctuary sits inside the line, border, property, prison, territory. The line helps to design and create enemies, both foreign and domestic, through enclosure. We know this. The line helps to create the alienated other inside practices of disregard. Now, friends, I know, like you do, that this idea of the other is probably the most overused idea in modern thought and theology and ethics. We all know this. Yet, in this regard, we need the idea. We need the idea to help us grasp the design of alienation facilitated by the line. One more time. The design of alienation facilitated by the line. This is the question that haunts sanctuary. What does it mean to live inside someone else's design? And for someone else's design to live inside us? One more time. What does it mean to live inside someone else's design? For someone else's design to live in us. Alienation, born of enclosure, is a design that designs. A design that designs. You learn this from design theorists. There are designs that are pregnant as they are created. They give birth to other designs by, in a sense, not showing that they have given birth to other designs. Alienation, born of enclosure, is a design that designs. The sociologist and urban planner Richard Sennett tells us that alienation offers us two options when we encounter the other. We shun them either by fleeing from them or by isolating them. Fleeing from them or isolating them. And he says that each way can take a built form. To flee or to isolate. To flee or to isolate. These are modulations inside our alienation. And if you don't remember anything else so far, that little sentence, these are modulations inside of alienation. Both build from the fundamental reformatting of body and land that we considered in earlier lectures, that turn land into private property, that must be claimed and held while also enclosing identity upon our bodies. That fundamental reformatting that so many of us now inhabit taught us that we carry our identities, whether we're talking about race or gender or even culture, without remainder on our bodies. And that our histories, our memories, our sense of being and knowing, our cultural practices, our rituals for living are carried in us like fleshly Swiss knives. Fleshly Swiss Army knives. And each attribute can be pulled out of us at will. Our bodies have been designed to be alienated from the land. And that profoundly shapes the ways we design sanctuary to shun alienated others. Option one is sanctuary created to flee the stranger, escape our enemies, and the stranger who potentially might become an enemy. Here we touch the reality of marriage made concrete. That is, of escape and the structures of living refashioned for and in escape. Marriage, excuse me, both as term and historical reality, is rooted in the flight of the slaves from the bondage of slavery into the wilderness areas to establish living against the governance of slaveholding societies. The political science Neil Roberts notes that Marons resided in liminal suspension between slaves on a plantation and colonizers dictating standards of normativity. They, in that liminal suspension, his words, that liminal suspension created zones of refuge, which enabled them to cultivate freedom on their own terms within a demarcated social space that allowed for the enactment of subversive speech acts, gestures, and social practices antithetical to the ideas of enslaving agents. Zones of refuge. From the beginning of modern colonialism, marked the lives of so many people as they created places where they could sustain themselves in memory, story, and hope. If option one is sanctuary for escape, then option two draws us to sanctuary in the shadow of isolation, where people are sequestered in one of two directions. Go left, you find ghetto, camp, district, neighborhood. The logic here is less escape and more control of people and population. People are surveilled and policed in ways that enhance their isolation. Go right, and you find gated communities, and communities with invisible gates formed by price points, denial of easy access, and most importantly, policing practice. Here you find beautiful and beautifully tamed landscapes, stolen away for exclusive eyes, and shaped to mirror retreat centers. We should call these places not zones of refuge, but zones of repass, because they exist in the shadow of death, invoking dead plantation masters through the creation of spaces that recall the colonial order of things. The dense history of zones of refuge and zones of repass reach us in this moment in the segregation practices that lay hidden in plain sight in our built environment. These two kinds of zones mirror each other as structures of alienation. They illumine the quest that lay at the heart. They illumine the quest that lay at the heart of creating sanctuary under the conditions of alienation. And what is that? To establish the trinity of what is safe, what is comfortable, and what is normal. What is safe, what is comfortable, and what is normal. The desire to secure these three things is understandable. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. The desire to secure these three things is understandable, especially in a world in which both land and body have been reformed in enclosure, especially in a world where racial existence and nationalist vision relentlessly press us toward creating these kinds of sanctuaries bound in segregation. What are you saying, Dr. Jennings? I'm so glad you asked me that question. The truth, my friends, is that sanctuary itself must be redeemed. You mean sanctuary isn't already redeemed? No. Sanctuary itself must be redeemed. And the beginning of that redemption lay beneath our feet. What if the sanctuaries that have been created and are being created under our alienating conditions could be turned toward a deeper reality of becoming sanctuary? We can catch a glimpse. There's that word again. We can catch a glimpse of that turning in some of the diaspora practices of Black folks, where a place of business or play or entertainment or beautiful loitering or quiet contemplation focused on the end of a fishing pole or seated in the corner of a porch begins to suggest a sanctuary being created that goes beyond sanctuary formed in alienation. I think of Toni Morrison's famous scene of the clearing in her epic novel Beloved, where it offers us a glimpse, is that word again, a glimpse of this. Now, for those of you who do not know, a clearing is a spatial opening in a wooded area created by human manipulation through removing trees or stones or roots, or occurring naturally through fire, soil configurations, animal grazing, animal migratory patterns. The clearing in Morrison's novel Beloved, if you all know the novel, and if you don't, tonight before you go to bed, read the whole thing. The clearing in Morrison's novel Beloved is the place where baby Suggs presided over a liturgy for the restoring of life for black folks, former slaves, oppressed flesh. The famous line is this: when warm weather came, baby Suggs holy, followed by every black man, woman, and child who could make it through, took her great heart, beautiful line, took her great heart to the clearing, a wide open place cut deep in the woods. Nobody knew for what, at the end of a path known only to deer and whoever cleared the land in the first place. In the heat, I love that line, in the heat of every Saturday afternoon, she sat in the clearing while the people waited among the trees. That's all you need to hear. She sat in the clearing while the people waited among the trees. What followed was a holy ritual that drew men, women, and children into the openness of the clearing, to laugh, dance, and cry in perichoretic exchange. Each group in turn laughing, dancing, crying. This was the materialization of grace in what they could imagine in that moment in the clearing. Here is where Morrison places in the mouth of baby Suggs the words for the redemption of flesh, black flesh. Baby Suggs tells them all to leave, baby Suggs tells them all to leave to love their flesh, love it hard. Love their flesh, love it hard. Their love opposes the hatred of their flesh beyond the clearing. There in the clearing, they become, dare we say it, congregation, singing, dancing, laughing, as an act of artisanry, creating the new body against the old. This moment, however, is quickly swallowed up in the flow of the novel, quickly, as the strong pull toward remembering the hidden pain drives the story forward. Yet the clearing does sit us in a place where we may begin to sense a becoming again. The clearing does sit us in a place where we may begin to sense a becoming. That becoming means the shape of a life aligning with the shape of a landscape and the merging of a somatic and geographic witness. The merging of a somatic and geographic witness. Students, write that down, even if you don't understand it. That merging becomes the ground for the redemption of sanctuary. And now, my friends, another poem, one of my own, that I want you to hear. It's called Touch a Sign. Touch a Sign. In the moments of my doubting, when old sorrows inherited and therefore unearned steal into my thinking space, constricting my mind breathing, the old black folks taught me to touch a sign. They said, open your windows, hear the wind signifying through the trees. See the ground stand at attention at the sun's gaze, the light dancing with the leaves. Sense in the small silences between the robin's cry and the bluebird's shouting, the slow forming of an amen. And remember how we can dream as we awake, and why we love, even if pain greets the day. On those days when my doubting refuses to yield, emboldened by injustices and willful ignorance, nurtured by the rain of insults, each one stinging like biting flies and smooth sucking mosquitoes, at the appointed hour of their choosing, when the sun shows its wisdom, dark tan mothers of the temple everywhere lead me outside while inside, and inside while outside. Place my body next to that old tree, its branches stretched out as if suspended in air, creating a canopy from which to hang melancholies alongside sparkling joys. I drop my head and realize I am standing on its roots, big, thick things, one with the black dirt, constituting the ground, the floor of it all. The tree says to me, nothing becomes, nothing thrives without this grace. My poem is about the exquisite wisdom of those black elders who knew their dirt flesh, those who sense the connection of bone to dirt. This poem is also about a deep preparation, stationing us to enter a knowing beyond our knowing, a knowing that unfolds in a life immersed in caring, the kind of caring found in bird and tree, rain and dirt. Yet to come to the redemption of sanctuary, we must come to Jesus, to the one who joined the life of God to our dirt flesh. With this old tree noted in the poem, I have come to Jesus, but not to his death, friends, not to his death, but to his life, to his listening to plant and animal, his listening to bird and water, his own standing in the sun, watching it dance off the leaves, seeing the ground stand at attention, and knowing the caring and caressing of the land. His own life is now aligned with the caring and caressing of the land and of the water. his own life now aligned with that caring and caressing. He will announce that alignment in the words he speaks that are echoed in the creation. Take the always astounding words found in Matthew 5:43 to 45. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. But, I'll start reading. But I say to you, no, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so you may be children of your Father in heaven, who for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. Jesus drew that caring of the creation which flows from the caring of God his Father into his own life, his own living and working. He felt the sun and the rain. He invites those listening to share in that caring with him. This is an invitation to sense that we are with him, the image of God, reflecting back to God, God's own caring, aligning our life with that caring to receive it and offer it. Now, while this text does not talk about the image of God, I want us to think about Jesus, the image of God, from this text. If he is the child of the Father in heaven, then at this moment of alignment, he invites his listeners to love their enemies, pray for them so that as to align their lives with the giving of the earth, with his own giving, then indeed the child who is the image becomes one with the children who are the image. And consider that text, that Hebrews text that comes along with it. I could quote a few church writers who do the same thing, but I'm going to pretend that I made this up by myself. Hebrews 3:1 through 3a. Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by a Son, who he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also created the worlds. He is a reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. This text reminds us that the image is creaturely. It is of the creation because the Son is the creator who has joined the divine life to the life of the creature. In so doing, Jesus is the exact imprint of God's very being, the very stamp of his nature, upholding the universe by the word of his power. Now, of course, so much of the good ink spilled in trying to explain what the Imago Dei is often bypasses the dirt. As the great theologian David Kelsey so powerfully taught us, coming to understand the Imago Dei as part of theological anthropology has been an exercise in vacillating between explicating what it is and who it is. What it is and who it is. Theological reflection on the image of God has sojourned from defining it as various capacities of the human being to forms of relationality that involve humans and the more than human world to our eschatological orientation. Various capacities of the human being to forms of relationality to our eschatological orientation, and many stops in between these constellations of ideas. Yet missing in all of it has been place. Missing in all of it has been the clearing where God joins us in our dirt flesh, calling out to us to love it hard, to see that dirt flesh joined to wind and rain, tree and green leaves, and to facilitate the loving of it hard. What if the image of God is a participatory reality of life in the dirt? Oh, write that down, students. What if the image of God is a participatory reality of life in the dirt? What if it is aligning our life with the caring of the land and water and animal in order to become with them sanctuary? Sanctuary, where place and person become one, where we receive the care and in turn offer care. Yet sanctuary suggests more than aligning with the caring of the earth. It means the unfolding of our lives, not simply in a place, but as a place made open to others in ways that overcome our alienation. In ways that overcome our alienation. Love your enemies, because God sends sun and rain on you and them. Become like sun and rain. This would be in part the kind, let's use the word that many of you know, that's probably somewhere in your head right now. This would be the kind of radical hospitality that womanist educator Nancy Lynn Westfield outlined in her classic text, Dear Sisters, A Womanist Practice of Hospitality. If you don't got that book, go out and buy it and read it tonight. Dear Sisters, A Womanist Practice of Hospitality, where she talks about a fundamental reformatting of human subjectivity inside hospitality by articulating a new way of being in place. If, however, Imago Dei is participatory, does that mean exclusivity? Exclusivity, it's exclusive. Does it mean it is a Christian preoccupation? Yeah, it should be a Christian preoccupation, not because it engenders exclusivity, but because it facilitates a discerning. Listen, it facilitates a discerning that opens to becoming a fleshly sanctuary. All who aim themselves at such a becoming may glimpse what Jesus saw, what Jesus sensed, what Jesus was. He is the new temple for living, the promised renewed earth begun at the sight of his body. So the image of God is a discerning, a sensing together life as sanctuary, a sensing of together life as sanctuary. One does not have to be Christian to enter that discerning and that sensing. But being Christian means you recognize that you are discerning and sensing, because there is one who articulated that discerning and sensing to you and for you. Indeed, the discerning is a sensing of the divine presence. God is present in the discerning and sensing. Let's think about this as a practice that directly challenges the practice of disregard that I mentioned a couple lectures ago. That's registered geographically and somatically. Disregard meaning that we have been taught that if something is going on beyond our property line, beyond our habitation, beyond our border, even if there is death and suffering and pain, it is none of our business. I'm reminded, as you might guess, of a poem by the poet Michael Keebler Diggs from his beautiful little collection called Worldly Things. The poem, I love my neighbor as myself. This is a great poem. I am driving around admonishing strangers. Hurry up, I tell them, or wear a helmet. Kids needing parental guidance, get it from me. Teens in black clothes at midnight, sensed but not seen like owls, receive my words as care. When I spy an elderly woman with her coat worn loose, I don't hesitate to yell, button up! I want the best for her. I learned of love in harsh commands, curt rebukes, and tired, ravenous hands. The rear view holds ancestral eyes, ravaged, not mine. The hard hand sending the window down isn't mine. It's mine. Love is history plus desire. Love is dominion. Yes. Talk, brother. Love is dominion. It is supposed to attack you. When you send it out, it stings your back like a slap of cold air. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a man driving away, shouting. That's beautiful. Keebler Diggs has aligned himself in this poem with the uncontrollable wind, the uncontrollable rain, with dirt, with trees, all uncontrollable, but moving in care toward becoming a sinew of connectivity, the beginning of sanctuary. This is a dominion of love worth pondering, worth aiming toward. Yet here we come full circle and return to the struggle to discern the contours of our existence as creatures, as sanctuary. Now we must face the deepest effects of an enclosed land and body and the relentless segregationist practices that shape our living. The struggle to embody sanctuary, is the struggle to live against boundary and border and a life governed by the line. It is the struggle to move beyond the quest to create homogeneous places, rooted in color, kin, and kind, as we say in the South, that ensure our safety, comfort, and what we perceive as normal, in which we want to exist. The struggle of sanctuary is the struggle to create a new sense of safety, comfort, and what is normal, beyond the line, beyond the homogeneous place. Now, of course, the question that this lecture presents is, what about church, Dr. Jennings? Because I know somebody's going to ask me about that. Is church sanctuary? Well, Church is where we come to know the goal, the calling to become sanctuary. Church is where we learn the collective gesture and the communal practice of embodying sanctuary. But here is where we also realize, listen, that there are others outside of church, others who are more serious than those in church about learning, more serious about becoming attuned to the aligning of their lives with the giving of the world, and therefore more willing to listen to our more than human kin, more willing to love their dirt flesh than we who inhabit the church are willing. If the Imago Dei is about discerning dirt flesh and aiming for sanctuary, then anyone, any group who are discerning are offering glimpses of the Imago Dei. Anyone, any group that are discerning. What if you could slip your body into the green leaf and wait for a breaking out, a breaking open? The goal of embodying sanctuary brings us to the end that is the beginning, to a consideration of origins, but in this regard, to a consideration of history and story in God. But not history and story as the point of creation, but to the wisdom that consideration offers in the crucial task of understanding ourselves as creators and as co-builders, and grasping a form of life that builds, always build in and toward the good. That will be the focus of the final lecture. Thank you very much.
Questions.
Good doctor.
Yes, thank you so much. I have a question about the line. Maybe it's about the politics of the line.
Politics of the line.
And the border. I'm framing in the key of trying to think with you about being Gentiles who worship the God of another people. Outside of a spatial imaginary or, an agonistic vision of the nations. And I see how borders are markers of hostility, whether it's church and synagogue or something more politically nationalist. But borders can sometimes be, maybe this is a reparative view of border, I want to see if you want to agree with it, the embodied horizon of the other or of the neighbor. That allow us to kind of recognize difference. Because I can imagine a critic might hear a kind of a false cosmopolitanism that is at odds with the biblical narrative of Israel and the nation as a medium of God's consummation of creation. So Richard Mouw, who you invoked, wrote a bit of a weird book, When the Kings Come In. It's about how nations allow us to proliferate the ways of naming God. And his examples are nation states.
Yeah.
With porous borders as expressions of the multitude. Yeah. Now, I assume you don't go for that reading.
No.
And Acts 17 has been used by Trump's America, apartheid South Africa.
Yeah.
But so does living against the boundary of the border, and I'm just a humble ethicist.
I know you are, my dear brother. You're very humble. Go for it.
Does this demand a political theology of open borders?
I think it requires first. This is a great question. Thank you so much. This is a great question. And as a student, I wrote a dissertation trying to argue, kind of giving a theological account of borders. But now, I mean, we have to feel the wound here, right? And you are very much aware of this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We have to feel the wound of that line. It's one thing to imagine a border. It's another thing to see how it came to be historically, right? And I think this is always the problem at the level of political philosophy, at the level of ethical reflection, the abstraction of separation, the way it then gets rolled inside difference, and then becomes a marker of creation, as my brilliant teacher, Dr. Mao, tried to teach me. And here I was smiling and listening and thinking, I do not agree, but I love you, but I do not agree. Why? Because remember, that line through the ground is a line through people. It's a line through history. It's a line through story. It's a line through community. It's a line that it not only cut, it killed. So if we could see borders in their full historical density, we would see blood flowing from them on both sides. Every border, we would see blood just flowing from those lines. And so to then speak of our life now being constituted behind it is to say our life is constituted in blood. In blood. So is it possible to start to reconfigure a life inside of enclosure? Yeah, we do it. I mean, that's us. But what we don't want to do is to draw this into our doctrine of creation, to then make nation, state, nation, ethnicity, peoples, all one seamless reality, theologically speaking. Remember, as we all know, the history of nations is the destruction of peoples, right? Going on to this very moment. There are peoples resisting being a part of nations and fighting hard. I don't want to be a part of this nation. All over the planet. That long history of those who do not want to be governed has to be factored into not simply a history of the bloody rise of nation states, but a history that should school a doctrine of creation to not weave itself into the contingencies created by the line. The line has created people. I mean, we are Americans here, many of us, but we know we are inside blood. We're inside blood. Now, what's so crucial about that? Inside the nation state, we've been made to speak inside of it and have it speak through us. We've been made to inhabit the national body. We call it citizen. And we've been made to think the possibilities of a faithfulness as disciples of Jesus inside of nation. I don't want to baptize any of that. In my commentary on the book of Acts, I talk about citizenship always as desperate citizenship. And then here I'm thinking of Paul, the moment Paul invokes that he is a citizen. Why does he do it? Because they're about to kill him. Hey, I'm a citizen. Right. He didn't invoke it to say I love Caesar. He invoked it so that he wouldn't get killed. I will invoke it so that you don't kill me. I will invoke it so that you don't try to hurt me or my family. I'm going to use it, but I'm never going to baptize this thing. Say it is descendant of God and it's good for me. Why? Because all this comes back to the first line you laid out. I will try to remember what so many people have said to me, Willie, put your head to the ground and listen to the land cry, because the line ran right through it. It was not a tattoo. It was a scar that yet bleeds. And that's what we have to face. That's a great question. Great question. Go ahead.
So I need to be careful with how I ask this question. As a Pentecostal, right? I'm curious for some pushback. Listening to your lecture, I'm thinking about the way how Spirit baptism might speak to this idea of sanctuary, right? So I'm thinking of Wolfgang von Dijk talks about this idea of the person becoming the altar, right? Becoming a space.
Yeah, I like that.
And I wonder, even, talking about when you were talking about the clearing of potentially this idea that fire clears out this space. And I'm thinking about the idea of like Holy Spirit, fire, baptism.
Yeah, that's a nice link. I like that. That's a nice link, yeah.
I'm wondering if you could give us maybe a way in which Spirit baptism could speak to it, or maybe a way in which Spirit baptism could be expanded beyond just a religious experience inside of the church at the altar, but maybe this idea of Spirit baptized creation or anything along those lines. I'm just curious if Spirit baptism could be a potential pathway to redeeming the sanctuary or the person as this embodied sanctuary of what God might be doing in the world.
That's a great direction you're thinking. And always remember that in the book of Acts, they are speaking languages which point to places, point to landscape. So Spirit baptism, speaking in tongues, speaking in languages, already announces that you are tied to the dirt. It's already there. You don't have to, because remember in Acts 2, those Jews from all over the diaspora, those you're Greek, are in shock and awe, because as my late colleague Lyman Sani would always, the way he would always translate it, that they don't just hear these Galileans speaking their language, they hear them speaking the mother tongue, the way we talk in the intimate spaces of our home. I don't know if Lyman Sani is right, but I like it. I'm gonna keep saying it because it's so beautiful. That there is the inside knowledge that is suggested by the speaking. And the inside knowledge is not just of culture, it's of the dirt. But now you are also gesturing toward the openness that is being invited for those who yield to the Spirit. And so there we have to stay within the Christological foundation for all of this. Jesus is the one who has received the Spirit, and Jesus is the one who allows the rain and the sun to caress him. They are not in competition. They are together. Why should we make them in competition? Why can't we have them together? Yeah, that's a great question. Now I saw, there you go.
Hi, I'm Taylor. It's good to meet you. Thank you for the poetry. Before God called me to be a pastor, and then after she spit into the dirt to make some mud and make me and slap my ass and call me good, God made me a poet, and so it made, thank you. It just makes a lot of logical sense to me to turn to poetry to help construct this, because poetry in some way, and this is my opinion, so you can disagree, but poetry in some way lowers the stakes of intimacy. Something about the way that a poet witnesses the world, the present world, and enters into it in a very extravagant way, and does that in front of a person when they read their poetry to a person, even just one. Something about that lowers the stakes for a listener to become intimate. And so I'm curious, and maybe this is a one-word yes or no answer, I don't know. And if so, please speak on that. But do you think that the bypassing of the dirt is from a place of this deep fear of intimacy and this fear of being witnessed? Because to not bypass the dirt, we would have to like closely look and like closely be looked at, like despite like our deep, just like unending desire for intimacy, just like how freaking afraid of it we are.
No, I think that's insightful. I would agree with that and layer onto it that what's also at stake with being able to take the dirt seriously is to take seriously what sanctuary means, an openness that dances with uncontrollability, which is, and I'm always want to be careful here because I'm not saying people open themselves to abuse. I'm saying that there is a power in the sun and the rain, a way of being that is also an invitation for us to echo that giving. And that's very, very important. But I love that insight. And I saw a hand over here. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, well, I don't remember, but go ahead, you got your hand up.
So when you began talking about sanctuary, my mind immediately went to the book Without Sanctuary.
Without sanctuary.
Right, and what it means to be witnessed in that context, right? And so when I'm thinking about witnessing and being witnessed, how do you address or remedy the fact that people can engage in Imago Dei with nature and can see reflections of God in that, but when it gets to the body, stops and still sees Jesus as white? And how do you address that breakdown?
Yeah. See, I'm not imagining that one. The one has that separation working with Imago Dei. This is come back to that original poem. This is about being witnessed. So it's about becoming sanctuary. Not at the level of how one experiences nature. It's how one is aligned with nature's giving. So by that very fact, it should start to point to you're pointing to is a serious contradiction, but it should start to point to that contradiction. That is, a contradiction in which sanctuary is inside segregation, which, if I understand what you're asking me, is part of the difficulty we're looking at here. When I talked about the difference between, the reality of zones of repass and zones of refuge. Zones of repass are places where I see God in nature, but I certainly don't see you because you ain't here on purpose. And so we're going after that. So it is that vision of sanctuary that needs redemption. You follow? You with me? But that's a great question you just asked me. You want to follow? Because I see another question forming in your eyes. Go ahead. Oh no! All right, one more.
Did you see? Oh, back there.
Did you see somebody?
I did.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't mean to have the last one. But, yeah. So along this trajectory of repass or refuge, right? And to go back to the line and the idea of the formation of the line and how that can be perverse in our notions of not becoming sanctuary in modern nation states and this kind of thing. I struggle with with how to conceptualize homogeneity in ecclesial communities, for instance, because to me, historically, contextually, the witness of the historically independent Black church tradition, for instance, at its best, and this is not to idolize it or romanticize it, has given glimpses of that of the kind of zone of not of repass of refuge, right? And that is so an all Black church
is a very different thing than an all-white church.
Yeah.
To me, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering what we do with that in this, here in the fallen world. And it means, like, along the lines, for instance, I was thinking as you were talking about this, as opposed to the border, what about the threshold, right? For me to cross the threshold of a historic black church is a different thing, it feels like to me, even than a border cross, or maybe is akin to a border crossing.
Interesting. So listen, I mean, I was kind of talking about that the whole time. So zones of refuge and zones of repass are both realities inside the line. They are both realities inside alienation. So don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that they should not exist. I'm asking, can they be redeemed? I'm asking, can they be angled toward overcoming alienation? So here is the problem. The desire to create spaces that are safe, spaces that are comfortable, and spaces where people feel it's normal. It's a powerful drive. And as long as we don't think through what it means to create those spaces, we will continue to underwrite the alienation. Now, you guys are much kinder than my other audiences. Because my audience says, well, no, Dr. Jennings, that's all we got. That's all we got. Whether I'm in the United States or South Africa or in Australia or New Zealand, that's all we got. And I'll say, okay, that's all you got? I thought you had rain, water, wind. What are you talking about? That's all we got. So I'm talking about the possibilities of a sanctuary that will give you even more of what you need. Even more what you need that is not trapped by the line. Even more what you need that is not trapped by the line. How can that be? Because you serve a God who is not trapped by the line. So it's possible. But if your deepest theological imagination reaches no further than the line, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say you believe. You believe the line. That's what you believe. You don't believe in Jesus. You believe the line. That's your God, the line. The line is your God. Doesn't matter. And so I've had people say to me, come on, Willie, listen. White, black churches were here when I got here. They're here now. And long as you and I are dead, they're going to be here. I said, but the point is you'll be dead. And you will have made no difference to that fact. That's nothing to be proud of. You'll be dead and you made no difference to that. So why are you telling me a fact that is a horrible confession? Last comment.